Gryftkin, but that's not here to there. Um, so I had got started with you way back when Sleeping Giants came out. It was a book club book for us. Unfortunately, I was also working two jobs at the time, and like I said, it wasn't a book club. So I did not get to finish that series. I'm going to have to get back to it because I just did your new series. Until the Last of Me is the second book in the series, just dropped last month. And of course, I wanted to start from the beginning, so I listened to both of them. And I have told everybody that I know I am not a fan of historical fiction, but I loved this book. And as I pointed out to you the other day, I actually kind of consider it historical science fiction. And I think one of the things that I loved that you did for this book is that a lot of historical fiction tries to force the characters on the stage of the world, unless it's one of those behind the scenes power brokers things, the people behind the kings. And you actually kind of hid them. So even though they touch base to a certain extent with certain historical people, it's not like you feel like, well, if that would have happened, people would have known, because they're very much trying to stay out of the spotlight.
Yeah, they do marry some historical figures even every now and then, but they don't make a lot of noise if possible.
What really impressed me on this, I've seen people do the historical fiction before where, like, okay, I'm going to throw this one under the bus because, I'm not a fan, but, like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer, but they take it and they put it in a piece of history. It's like, this is the time frame. Your stories, especially when you go back, and I'm not going to do any spoiler stuff, but let's just say it's about a group of people that each generation has a number. And currently, I think the current one is the 100, or at least when we start in book one. Is that correct?
What? I'm sorry.
Oh, currently you start with is it the 100 or is it the 99 that
The
starts in
99 in the first
the
book.
first book,
Yeah.
99? But you actually do a little backdrop, or you go back and talk about some of the other generations. And of course, again, they call them by numbers. Your historical breadth on some of these, where I'm like, wait, did that really happen? I had to go look it up. Is history is that an obsession for you? Oh, I realize I just had my light on. No wonder I look so dark there. Is history an obsession for you, or is this something that you had to look up because you wanted to put the story in that setting?
No, I know nothing. I mean, I I wish I knew stuff. I wish I could write what I know. It's just, you hear about actual police officers who write detective novels, and God, I wish I could do that. But I don't know anything fun. So it's just research, reading. And for this series, I it has a lot in common with For All Mankind on Apple TV. For those who've seen it, it actually starts with their premise is that the space race was won by the Russians. They got to the moon first, and then it changes the way things happen afterwards. And they take actual events from the space race, but they sort of reorganize them and they mess with them in all sorts of ways, because what they're doing is sort of an alternate timeline. I didn't want to do that. The result of these women messing with history is the history we know. And so every single thing in there happened, and it happened when it happened, which was also a problem because I had time issues with the plot at some point. So you kind of have to go with where things are and pick the right events so you can get things moving. And but yeah, it's just endless amount of reading. Uh, but I enjoy it though. I have an academic background. Uh,
A little bit. I looked at your bio. Yeah, you've got a little bit of a little bit of a background there.
yeah, and I don't know if it's habits I picked up doing the PhD, but I really love reading stuff that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. The even the idea for this series sort of came reading completely random things about fish, and
Interesting.
yeah.
Actually, now that you say that, I remember a few things, but yeah, I would not have necessarily taken the fish story and had it lead to what you ended up writing. But I do
Yeah,
remember you
it's
talking about the fish in the books, though.
yeah, I do. It's one of those things too. I mean, people say, if it's not essential to the plot, don't put it in. Well, I don't know. If it's really cool, I'll put it in. If I learn something nice, and I want you to learn it too, and that's in there. But for the longest time, I'd wanted to write characters that could span millennia and didn't know how to do it. Didn't want to write immortals because then it's the same person, just super old and grumpy. And like, I don't know, I didn't want to, I didn't know how to do it and do it justice. And then I read about this fish. It's called the Amazon Molly, lives in Texas, and they trick a male of a species that resembles them, and he's into sleeping with them. And so the male's like, "Ooh, yeah," and but then they pass on all their genes to their offspring, and none of the male genes. So they're all female, and they're all genetic copies of each other. There are no male Amazon mollies, and if you pick one at random, it's more or less genetically at least the same fish.
Right.
So I thought this is amazing. I can have my cake and eat it and have it again, and because I can have characters that span millennia that are essentially the same in many ways, but also who were born at different times, go through different lives, different eras with different values, and like all of that shapes them into being their own person despite being a copy of the previous one. And that gave rise to this series.
Which I love too, because you think about it, you didn't write quote unquote the story, but you kind of did. It's every teenager feels like your parents have no idea what it was like to be your age. And yet it seems like every one of the, as you go through from the 99 to the 100, etc., almost all the teenagers are feeling the exact same way about their parents as each generation goes on. Well, you're boring. You stick to the rules. You've never done anything fun. You've never, I want to be my own person. And then, next generation, it replay. It's we're right back to where we started.
It was one of the fun things to play with this series because we do it too, right? When we grow up, I'm not going to turn into my parents, and then boom, we all do. And but it takes that whole struggle to be your own thing takes a whole different meaning if you're a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And you look like your mom, and your children will look exactly like you, and they'll be the same height and the same age. And so this idea of like building your own personality is sort of same that as what everyone else is feeling, just on steroids. And it was super fun to write.
I can imagine. The one thing I found interesting at the end of the second book, I literally thought that was a perfect ending to the series. But
It's dark.
then I listened to the little part that you did afterwards. Um, for anybody who doesn't know, I listened to the audiobooks on this one.
Aren't
And
they great?
they were good. I love the fact too. I'm not usually a huge audiobook fan. I do it sometimes just to, usually not something for something I'm going to do a chat on, but something to fall asleep to, that type of thing. Just something to do when I'm doing other stuff and I don't have to really pay attention to it too much. But I think one of the things that really turned for your book, and Jen Lyons kind of had a little bit of the same thing where she had different people for different parts, but it was just like the narrator and 2 points of view. So it was just like three people. Your books, they got a whole cast in there. Do every, because I remember listening to the first one and somebody's going back and forth. I'm like, wow, she's really good at doing different voices. And like, no, that was a guy. That was a guy reading that part. Um, so I think it was much more entertaining. And I think it's also one of the things you have sometimes with books, not with yours, although some of your characters do change names occasionally just because they're trying to again hide. Um, but I always knew who was talking, which I loved. It made I think the audiobooks much easier to follow along. But then I got a little bit to the end there, and I can't find anything online. But you did mention at the very end of book two about book three, and I'm thinking, where the heck is he going to go from here? And I can't ask that without getting spoilers, because I feel like book one and book two were very like a continuation of the very same story. Um, I feel like with how book two ends, book three's got to be something completely different.
Yeah, well, I think the first two books are also pretty different. And if you read my first series, all three books are very different from one another. I don't like I I write for fun. I mean, mostly I get paid for it, but I if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it. And I don't I don't like writing the same book twice. So I read different things. I like to change the pace, change the mood. So I think there's a lot more levity in places in book two than there is in book one. It's not quite as dark. It's set in the 70s, so I try to go with the mood a little bit. The ending, it was, yeah, I kind of liked the way it ended. But there has to be a third book. For one thing, we've never met the one.
Right.
We don't know how this all started. Because the knowledge, or at least a good chunk of it, was lost over time around the 11. And so I had to tell the story of the one, and there's this relationship between the Kipsu and the tracker that has basically shaped their entire lives for 3,200 years, that has an origin, and we learned that, but it also needs an end. They it comes to its, I think, its natural conclusion, and we do learn where it all started. And so I'm pretty happy with book three, actually.
Yeah, I'm not. I couldn't find a name for it. I couldn't find a could be published date things. Is there any, without spoiling anything? Is there any information on this book?
We were actually saving this for later, just because it comes out, I think, April 18, 2023.
Okay.
I might be off a day or two, but and we were going to announce it later, but a certain bookstore that rhymes with Farnes and Foble was having a 25% sale on pre-orders, and they included the book. And suddenly we had to tell people it's on until tomorrow, I think. And so yesterday I put something online that to talk about it and say, oh, by the way, that's the book. And it is called For the First Time Again.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I tried looking up Take Them to the Stars book 3 today, and I couldn't find diddly on it. But maybe Google just hasn't had time to catch up with
Yeah,
you on the page
there's
there.
a like an empty Goodreads page for it, and Macmillan, as of today, now has a thing for it too, because we had to talk about it. But
Yeah, sorry they snuck your thunder out of there. It's like, okay, I had a plan for that.
but it's
Um,
okay. Never been a huge fan of, like, 3 days from now we'll have a huge reveal and it's like
well,
a title. It's not the end of the world. I mean, you'll yeah.
yeah, but I'm sure you get like the blank cover so far. I'm sure they haven't figured the cover art out, or is it that far? You have the cover
Mm,
art and everything.
well, they might have something almost done. I haven't seen it though.
Oh,
Right
cool.
now, all I've seen is the cover to come. Or yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, well, here, breaking news.
Speaking of
Um,
the audiobook, though, I've been so lucky. All my novels are full cast.
Gotcha. Yeah, I read Sleeping Giants. I wasn't really into audiobooks back then. Um, but knowing that, I may do the audiobooks for the last two because now that I've read these two and I've loved them so much, I remember liking Sleeping Giants, but it was it was like when it first came out in paperback. That's when it because it's a book club and not everybody can afford to spend money on
Yeah.
hardcovers every month. But yeah, we read that one, like I said, when it first dropped in paperback, so it has been quite a while.
I was so happy too. And when this series came out, they sort of teased that it might be possible, and I didn't know if they actually managed to do it, but they did. They found a mother and daughter to an actual real life mother and daughter to voice the mother and daughter. It's amazing.
I remember because I remember them talking about it because they kind of like a mini interview with them at the end of the
Yeah.
audiobook. And it was, I also thought it was kind of fun because they had such different voices. And of course, I mean, these are professional readers. They could have been making up those voices, but it sounded like they really had two completely, accents and everything like that.
They do
At least
sound
when I was listening
completely
to them.
different. And it's funny because the Jilly Bond, who voices Sarah in the first book, the mother, voices Mia, the daughter, who's now older in the second book, because they would have the same voice at the same age, right? And her daughter, Imogen, voices Lola. Mia's daughter. But it's interesting because they give each character their own thing, and they work together on the
Mhm.
first book, so they know, like Julie, who voiced the mother, knows what kind of tone and voice and personality the daughter had in the first book. So she's incorporating some of that in her rendition for the second one. It's super interesting.
It's great for the continuity as well, too.
Yeah.
You did talk about the difference in tone. For anybody who hasn't read the book yet, we do have to understand that the first book was set during Hitler. Um, so the tone by necessity would not be quite as, I don't want to say happy-go-lucky because of everything they go through, but in the second book, the teenager is worried about parties and friends. Uh, the first book, you're more worried about surviving this thing. But again, the fact, like I said, I love the fact that you go all over the place. And I also love the fact that you do the little thing at the end in the audiobooks. Again, I didn't see the print copies on these ones, so I don't know if all that information is there that you
No,
actually
it's
do
there.
the reading. I love hearing about the little, like I said, the stories that you came out with. The story about the Molly was in book one at the end. You talked about,
Yeah.
and some of the other stuff that you've run across. I really loved. I could kind of see it coming. I won't spoil anything, but I really loved. I knew exactly what was going to happen when the lady came out and they were all chanting. The girls were chanting around the guy who was trying to take the taxes,
Oh yeah.
and it's like, oh, I know, because knowing that the science and the math and everything is like, now I know why she had him come back in 9 I knew, I saw exactly what was coming. Um,
Aglionis, or Aglionike of Thessaly.
yeah, the stuff though that you had to research and go through and then figure out, and you did a great job. I'm going to tell everybody that right now. But the fact that you got all this historical stuff and made it fit the narrative, this book will make you accidentally learn things.
Yeah.
But
I
I
love
just love.
doing this stuff. I mean, I just reading about all these historical figures, and like especially in the early days of astronomy, where they're looking at stars, but they don't know what it is they're looking at. It could be giant muffins or flashlights or whatever. They don't know, but yet they do make like significant discoveries. These people were geniuses with just little nothing to go on uh, with. And it was so much fun reading about all of them. I mean, I could have done that and just never written a book. But the amount of time I spent reading for this is ridiculous. If my editor, or at least if my agent knew, he would probably come over and beat the hell out of me. Uh,
No wonder this book took so long. I also love though the fact. Again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers in case somebody hasn't read this. You'll figure out why they're trying to get to the stars later. But the fact that you gave them, they're super geniuses, but you gave them some superhuman everyday characteristics too. Everything from, the mom yelling at the teenager not to make a joke about Uranus, and then she starts laughing when she tries to say something later. And there was another one that just slipped right out of my mind I was thinking about. But the teenagers, they do some very teenager thing. Uh,
yeah, some of it is just me. I mean, and because Uranus jokes are unavoidable because you have to type these things, and it's so easy when if you're not extra careful to come up with like funny sounding sentences, and then you're kind of stuck with them and you're laughing, so you think, well, I guess they would be laughing. Maybe I'm just immature, I don't know.
no,
uh
I feel like sometimes is that somebody's going to make the joke anyhow. You might as well go there first.
yeah.
But like I said, it was just those little human elements that I thought made the story more interesting.
Thank you.
And I really wish I'd actually finished and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, the Themis files. Is it Themis or Themis?
Here's a little anecdote. uh the editor who bought the series, the first book, it was going to be self-published originally, right? And the first book, I had called it the Themis Files, and my editor didn't like the title, in large part because he didn't know if he was supposed to say Themis or Themis, and that ended up being the series title, and the first book was called Sleeping Giants. So every time someone asks me, I think it's funny because we've had like a long conversation about renaming the first book, and then once you decide to rename it, you go through this ridiculous process where you kind of know what you want, something about big robot being buried underground, and so you're buried behemoth sleeping, and then you come up with 80 million synonyms for those two words, and after a day of playing with them, you can't see anything, you can't see the difference, you can't think,
Mm,
and you just go to bed, and a few days later you somehow manage to agree on one. Yeah.
that's like me coming back for a new vacation where my wife is, she likes trying to cut down all the pictures she's taken for a book. And so she'll give me like 17 pictures of a moose from a slightly different angle and then ask me which one I like better. I'm like they all look the same to me or close enough that I don't care. Just pick something.
And on a
That's all.
phone, it's you can't even look at them all at once, so you can't see the tiny differences. You just go back and forth, and they're like, "This is the same picture. It has to be." And
It's kind of like women's like, which pair of shoes do you like better? Aren't those the same pair? I don't know what you're talking about. Um, but I think too. I mean, if we talk about Themis, I think you said Themis. Is that what you said? Your
I say
pronunciation was
Themis, but
Themis.
yeah,
Um, but I just remember listening to these books too, and I don't know if she was is she supposed to have a British accent? The mom, is that what's supposed to be coming through?
she has a bit of a British accent.
Yeah.
They're both British for real, so
Oh, okay. But a lot of the words, and I can't. I should have written them down at the time. I just kind of noticed them as we were going through, and I thought about it later. She says a lot of words, and again, I'm American. We don't really do the Queen's English down here. She says a lot of words just slightly different than how I've pronounced them my whole life, and I'm just listening to the book is like, wait, is that how I'm supposed to say that? I don't know now. It's like, have I been
I
saying
had
this
the
wrong my
exact same
entire life?
reaction.
That's like I tell people I was like in my 40s before I finally realized that there is a difference between the pronunciation of forte, like this, which is from Italian, which is a musical note, and fort, which is from the French, which means that something's your strong suit. You're not supposed to pronounce the E at the end. I'm like, everybody I know in America pronounces the E.
It's not my forte. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like,
Yeah.
and then I found out I've been doing it wrong for 40 something years. I
Well,
figured
the
if you say something's your fort, though, it confuses the heck out of people. So I've just given up on that one. I'm like, I'd rather be understood than be correct sometimes.
but I went online to check on the pronunciation of a few things because of the way Julie Bond pronounced them in the books, and
Mm-hmm.
she's usually right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I assumed as an American my English was incorrect anyhow. So I just figured that should be my baseline. The British person is probably saying it correctly.
I was happy voicing the further reading section of the second book. It was much easier than the first one because of all the German and especially of the Russian names.
Oh yeah.
Uh, it was endless. Like every two lines, there was a word that I couldn't pronounce to save my life. And so you spend like a half hour looking it up online to hear other people pronounce it. And then you try to say it and you get it right a couple times. But to get it right like this, like as a single word alone, is a completely different story than to get it right while you're reading, like trying to keep
Yes.
the flow going. And it's kind of stressful if it's not what you do for a living.
Oh, I can
Uh,
imagine.
yeah.
I remember I used to be a bookseller. Technically, I didn't quit, and technically, they didn't fire me. So I guess I'm still a bookseller. I'm just not working there. But I realized I probably pronounced Rick Riordan's name incorrectly because I'd never heard anybody say it
Yeah.
for years. And because you look it up online, it's like, how do you pronounce this? And everybody's like Reardon. And then finally, I heard him talk, or Riordan. Finally, I heard him say it, and I realized I've been mispronouncing it the entire time. Like, okay, that's how he says his name. I did go out of my way to find an interview where you introduced yourself so I could pronounce, because I'm gonna feel stupid if I'm just up here and it's Sylvain Neuvel and I find out it's Sylvain Neuvel. I'm like, oh crud, I got that wrong. So
Oh, there's a site called How to Pronounce, and
okay,
it
doesn't always
has
work for names
a
though.
million things. So, and it popped up, and I saw my name there. So I listened to it, and it was horrible. It was just horrible. And so I added the pronunciation. So one of the pronunciations there is mine.
Oh, nice. Well, at least
but
somebody can get your name right.
but if you're an Anglophone, you can't say it. There are two sounds in my name, one in each, one in the first name, one in the last name that people who were born and raised in English normally can't pronounce at all. So there's the nasal in Sylvain and the in Neuvel. So my name is sort of supposed to be pronounced Sylvain Neuvel, but no one does that. And when they try, it's usually worse. So
That's
I've
why I
gotten
didn't
used
try.
to Sylvain Neuvel. And that's how I introduce myself now. I'm Sylvain, like the Carly Simon song.
Mhm. And I think the one that I saw was one where you actually did pronounce it the correct way. And I'm like, that's why I didn't even try. I'm like, I'm going to try, I'm going to sound like I'm trying to mock the French accent if I try to say your name correctly. And I
No,
just kind of went with Sylvain Neuvel because I don't think I could pull it off smoothly. I could sit here and try it for 5 times and get one of them right. But I didn't know if I was going to introduce you quite correctly if I tried to go with that accent.
now, if you're not sure, think you're Sylvain. I bet you think this song is about you.
Oh, well, hey, there you go. I actually had not gone there, and that's kind of funny because in my head, almost everything is a song lyric. So, all right. So we do have a third book coming out. Man, I want to ask you so many questions, but I don't want to spoil it, and we've got a whole year to wait. So let's get away from that. Let's talk a little bit about you then. Like I said, usually I talk about you and then go to the book, but I couldn't wait on this one because I love the book so much. You have got quite a collection of careers to pull from when it comes to some of your stuff. If I remember correctly, you're a linguist uh, teacher in India, professor.
Not for long though. I was teaching other professors and graduate students for about a month. Yeah, I've had just about every job you can think
It
of.
still makes a great little blurb on your bio, though. You got to admit, you're teaching linguistics, software engineer. I
Why
remember
not?
that one was on your list there. You've had a lot of jobs where people would be, like feel like that's impressive to be able to say I could do that. Author, software engineer, linguistics professor, and you've just decided to be an overachiever and do all of them.
I don't think it's overachieving. There's one. Some people are real overachiever. Like they'll do one thing and then they'll try to do a second thing and be the best at it and whatnot. I If there's one common thread in the billions of jobs that I've had, is it's mostly that I went with the flow. Uh, Even now being a full-time writer, that didn't happen because I forced it. It just happened, and I just ran with it. But and all of that, all those changes, and they usually come with moves. I would change travel from one city to the next, and then there was this opportunity to do something cool I'd never done before, and I'd be like, all right, now let's do this. And when the same when I went back to school after a while. I got a BA in linguistics, and I was going to go do something else. And my professors said, if you apply to big American schools, they might pay for you. So I'm like, all right. So I applied to he said, apply to all the schools you think you have no shot of getting in. They're the ones that have the money. So I said, all right. And I ended up going to the University of Chicago. I got in at Yale too, but I went to Chicago, loved it, spent 4 great years there. And yeah, but
So what story brought you down to California selling ice cream? I get Chicago, but
I uh I bought a motorcycle. I didn't have a license plates or insurance
oh,
or anything. But I had the bike. It was old, super old, Maxim 1100 anyway. And it was with a friend of mine, and we just got bored, and I'd gone to California in a car with a friend of mine before, and this time we took the bike. We didn't have any money. Like we ran out of gas before we got to Buffalo, and then had to find odd jobs and whatnot. And eventually we made it there. We stayed for about 6 months. Again, even over there, I sold ice cream, but we worked construction. We did just everything you can think of.
yeah, I was having a hard time picturing selling ice cream, covering the bills in California. Well, you didn't necessarily say LA, but California can get a little expensive.
Oh yeah, it was expensive. But I mean, we eventually we found a job like at someone's house working there, and so we had a place to stay that sort of came with the job, which really changes everything. But yeah.
I feel like you can get away with the no plates now a little bit easier. I swear, when I was younger, I forget to swap out my tags, because I registered my car. I've got my tags. I just haven't put them on the plate, and I get pulled over. The last 2 years of the pandemic, I think the cops are like, I don't even care. It's like I see cars all around. It's like that tag is from 3 years ago.
I remember getting pulled over in New Mexico, not by state, but by the sheriff. And I thought, this is bad. So he gets out the car and he comes over and he says, show me your driver's license. And my first reflex is to start speaking French. Just,
Mhm.
but it's super hard to speak French without saying an English word every now and then. If you're just rambling, you'll say toaster, bacon, whatever, croissant, something you'll recognize and you'll know you're just messing with him.
Mhm.
But I just kept babbling and babbling. And eventually he was getting a little frustrated. He took out his own driver's license and he showed it to me. And I said, it's you. And he left.
But hey, that'll work.
Yep.
Um, Actually, kind of reminds me a funny story. I lived across this. Well, it was my grandparents' house, but their neighbor one time was telling me a story. I can't remember where he was going to. I think it was somewhere over in Europe, uh, maybe Finland or something like that, wherever his wife was from. And he got to the airport, and I guess he got Sahara Krishnas started talking to him. I think it was Sweden, because I think he said he realized after he said it, he told them, "I don't speak Swedish," but he said it in Swedish and outed himself. It's like, whoops. Yeah, you got to be careful. With my luck, if I tried something like that, I can speak a little Spanish. I'd get some cop that was fluent, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm lost here. That's all going downhill.
I
What
was
do you?
18 though. I mean, I would never in a million years now, attempt to go anywhere without a license
Right.
or anything. You like my bold years are long gone.
I didn't know there was a guy I think it was in Florida a couple years ago that I read a story about where he got pulled over by the cops because his tags were expired by like 25 years, and he told the cops, "I've been busy." Like it's good if you can pull it off, but yeah, they didn't go for that one. One of the themes I saw in yours, and I love the fact that you've included it, but I don't feel like you've got preachy, which I think can turn some people off. Your last book did cover some things like, for instance, climate change, things like that, but they're mentioned. They're not, it's definitely presented as fact, but it's not necessarily beating somebody over the head with it. I did see that you also had some work in some soil decontamination. So is the environment? Did you do the job because of how you felt about the environment, or did the job maybe affect how you felt about the environment? That
Oh,
I get political. This is just a one-off question.
yeah, that's not political. Uh, that job was weird. I someone I knew was a engineer, worked for this soil decontamination company, and he needed help one summer. And I went for what I thought was going to be a few days, turned into a few months, and I spent a couple of years, I think 3 years maybe, working there, doing just everything. I don't know if it made me conscious about anything other than the fact that just gas companies make a mess out of everywhere they go. We were just mostly decontaminating soil that was where a gas company was located before. Some spills every now and then, but it doesn't really focus your mind on like we need to save the planet type of thing. Uh, but when I was researching this, I was reading about other things, and one of the things that strikes me, reading about climate change and the environment, is how long we've known. I mean, it's not there's nothing particularly new there. We knew, we knew CO2 would do what it does. We knew it uh, like 100 years ago. We knew it over 100 years ago, and nothing has changed except that every now and then, once in a while, people would start talking about it. And
Mhm.
what I found interesting, and we talk about it a bit in the second book, is for a little while there was a lot of talk about saving the ozone layer.
Yep, I remember that.
But no one cared about the environment. Like it wasn't like, we need to, you know, we don't want the sea rising, or we don't want people to die or whatever. They just cared about mostly skin cancer. That was the thing. And so we had to fix the ozone layer so we wouldn't get skin cancer. But yeah, I start reading about one thing and then I end up reading about another thing, and a lot of them have to do with the planet. And so there's a little bit of that here and there. The 98 was actually doing quite a bit of research because she thought the life on Earth might be coming to an end, which would make their entire thing a bit of a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe she could go surfing instead. And yeah, so I tried to just put it in because it's real and it's there. But yeah, there's no.
I actually love that you included a story too, that because it's one that I used when they first started the whole, before they called it excuse me, before they called it climate change, they were doing the whole global warming thing. And I knew some younger people that couldn't understand why in the world older people weren't taking it seriously at first. And you actually mentioned in the story the fact that she locks onto the fact that, like, we all knew about the climate change and stuff like that, but all they could focus on was the upcoming ice age. I think there was like a Time magazine cover and stuff way
Yeah,
back in like the 70s. And so I was trying to explain to people, it's not that we don't necessarily believe the science. It's just like 20 years ago, we were going to be in an ice age. Now you say we're in global warming. It's one of those things where
yeah, the
that's
thing is,
why people are a little bit hesitant to just jump on whatever's being said at the moment.
yeah, the press is to blame there. I mean, I'd say 98% of scientists were agreeing back then too, but somehow, of course, the guy with the sort of far-fetched ice age theory is the one the New York Times is going to publish because it sells copies.
Oh, New York Times. I knew there was Times in the title somewhere, but yeah.
I don't know if it's the New York Times. I vaguely remember writing about it, but yeah. So it's yeah, and then you go and you talk to people about global warming, and they're like, "But they're predicting an ice age, you idiot!" And yeah,
Yeah.
but the sort of the core science behind that, it has been solid for the longest time. One of the things I loved reading about, though, when it comes to the environment, is the beginning of ice core research.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because if you want to know if the temperature has been changing, you need to know how warm or cold it was, but not 30 years ago, just looking at the the
Right.
old almanac or
Actually
whatever.
just keeping
You
track.
want to know
Yeah.
like 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 3,000. And how do you do that? It's just looking at air molecules that have been trapped in ice, and also
Which you may have
uh,
also snuck into your book.
the types of isotopes in the ice sort of tells you really a lot of what you want to know about what the weather was like, a million years ago. It's pretty amazing.
And I love the fact, like I said, you actually, that's another thing that you mentioned in your book. And a lot of this stuff is, science that we've known, but your characters have a tendency to stumble over these things while looking for something else. Like, I'm trying to get the answer to this, and then I find out this. But I think even your main character, she talks about it, at least in the second book, again, as you're saying, how long we've known some of this information. So I appreciated that. The test. I'm just going to ask you because that's the one I have not touched that one. I know that was a standalone. What can you tell us about the test? Just because, like I said, it's the only one of your series that I haven't touched on.
Well, it's a small book. It's a novella. It's about 100 pages. And it's about dentists from Iran living in the UK who has to take the British citizenship test. And bad things have happened. And so things have changed. They're a little more strict. And he's actually taking the test for his entire family, only men between the ages of, I'm making this up here, but I think it's like 25 to 55 or whatever. Take the test, and if he passes, he and his family can stay, and if he fails, they have to go back. And it is science fiction. There is an element of that slightly futuristic element in it. but it's a book that's supposed to make you think, and I think it works. I was really proud of that one. It's super tiny, but it packs a punch.
Well, it's like I'm actually going to have to add that one to my list now too. I've always found it very impressive. People, since you're talking about the citizenship test, people that make it as an American citizen and pass that test, because most Americans can't pass that test, and we live here, and we've supposedly studied the U.S. history for 12 years of our life. Well, not 12, maybe start when you're in third grade, but like we're supposed to know this stuff, and then we're expecting people to come over who are supposed to know all this stuff that we don't know ourselves.
Yeah, that test is a little more hardcore though, the one I wrote.
Gotcha. Well, like I said, I'm definitely going to have to give it a try. Got to add that to my list. I think I've overstretched myself. I really thought when I started this thing that I would be maybe doing one of these a month, and I'm like doing it every 2 weeks, and I won't go any faster because I feel like I'm not giving you the proper time to like read your books and stuff like that in between. And again, I'm all picking all authors that I've read before, but some of you have written a few books since the last time I read. I cannot keep up. I like too many authors. I've done a lot of sci-fi, which of course brought me to you. But I'm one of those unfortunate people. Like I know people that love mystery books, and I know people that love science fiction books. I know people that love business books, and I just love books. So I can't keep up with any genre at all. So, a couple of questions that I've learned to ask over the course of time here, talking to different people I've talked to. So, a couple I want to throw at you. No pressure if you don't have anything prepared. Um, what is there something that you have always wanted somebody to ask about you that has never been asked? Like a secret, thing that you're proud of but never comes up in conversation. Uh, like you're
Hmm.
secretly a ninja or something like that.
I am a ninja. I don't know. I'm shy by nature. I've learned to sort of overcompensate. So I have a big mouth, speak loudly, I take up room wherever I go, but a lot of it is a bit of a defense mechanism. So I never really liked talking about myself a lot.
Gotcha. Well,
So
that was the wrong question to ask. Got it. So on a different tack, then, what is there something, a question that you want to be asked, not personal, something about, your writing, something about your story, something that you wish somebody picked up on, but nobody seems to have noticed that little Easter egg or thing that you're really proud of that you snuck in.
there are so many, but that I go fishing for. I once in a while I'll go online and use my social media to like and run a little contest and then ask questions about all the bazillion little Easter eggs that are in those books. These ones are just cramming with actual facts. The first three books have just little things that I've added here and there, numbers that keep coming back. And if you dig a little bit, you can figure out what that number is and why it's there, which has nothing to do with the story itself, though. Little movie references in Waking Gods. I'm going to spoil it a little bit, but they nuke Madrid, and the plane that flies over Madrid has this conversation with the tower, and they're using code names, which are a reference to a movie. I'm not going to say what it is, but if people want to,
No,
dig
no,
it
that's
up
fine.
and go and look for it. So I'm always impressed and happy when someone comes back at me with a little nugget that I buried in there that like one person out of 100,000 will notice. But
That's like I always, and I don't know if you have you ever read Ready Player One. You're allowed to say no. He's
I've never read the
Ernest
book.
Klein. The thing that I always thought was weird about the book, and don't get me wrong, I love the book, but I'm reading this book and I feel like there's a lot of stuff in here that is aimed at a very young audience, and it is completely full of 80s references. So I'm getting all these 80s references, and I'm thinking none of the young adults who are reading this have any clue what's going on, except for poor people like my daughter who was raised by me, who has had to live through all this stuff. But I just love those little things that you're reading, and all of a sudden you catch on to something. Is like, I'll bet you he's talking about so and so. Actually,
Yeah,
but
I put a lot of knowledge and trivia in my books, but I never wanted it to be necessary. It's just
mm,
more like a little bonus piece of candy, like something. Here's a little gift while you're reading.
I love those in movies too. I mean, you see it a lot more often now, where especially in like the superhero movies where the average person that's just going to watch the movie doesn't catch it at all, but the comic book nerd is like, "That's from so and so, and
Yeah.
that's a reference to this thing." Um, so one question actually that leads me. I hadn't thought about this one before, but I think it's a perfect question for you. Knowing that you do all this research and knowing that you love all these little facts, and then you've got to figure out how to get them into the story. What's a fun fact that you've learned that you just haven't figured out how to get into one of your stories yet? Something that you want to put in there sometime, but you're hanging on to it. Or is that a spoiler?
Hmm. Well, I'm working on a few things. Is there something I really, really want to? Well, there's something I want to read more about,
Okay.
and but it's kind of weird because it seems like it disappeared from the world. Not that long ago at MIT, they were working on something that would cure viruses, but
Mhm.
all of them. Because when a virus attacks a cell, I think it makes double-stranded RNA or something like that.
We're going to believe you on this one.
I'm gonna get it wrong. Don't listen to me. Whatever. Read it online, and they're working on the thing that would recognize basically any cell that was infected by any virus
Interesting.
and go kill it. And so now, I mean, and they had preliminary tests on in a lab or whatever that were really promising, and I've never heard anything about it again ever. And if you're into conspiracies, you can think that
No,
big
no, that's the first
pharma
thing I
got
was saying
in.
is like, I'm not a
Yeah,
conspiracy
like
theorist, but I can see somebody buying, big pharma buying
exactly. I
that.
mean, it's like a Tucker man in his dream, and then Ford and GM just like ruin him or whatever. You can sort of see the financial and political pressure that would sort of try to get something like that, at least if not stopped secret. But whatever,
Right.
conspiracy aside, I would love to know what they're doing with it, what's happening. I thought it was amazing. We can do cool things when we set our mind to it. Humans are
Mhm.
are actually pretty cool.
Exactly. So what I'm going to ask you, just kind of a wrap up question. I do this for everybody. Give a shout out to whatever, doesn't have to be. It could be a chain or anything, but a local brick and mortar store that you like to go to.
I try to do things with Saga Bookstore in Montreal as often as I can. They will host things. They're a little tiny bookstore that specializes in genre in both French and English. So they'll run if the books are translated, they'll have it in French and English, which is super cool. And they do events and whatnot. But if we're going to do shout outs, since I'm probably not talking to a lot of people from Montreal, I would like everyone to go out to their favorite local bookstore
Mhm.
and ask whoever's there for a debut that came out during the pandemic.
Okay.
Because, well, lots of bad things happen, and I'm not trying to compare. People died, so that's not that's worse. But some people's dreams have been crushed. If you'd been working trying to get your first book published for like 15 years, and it came out during the pandemic, during BLM, during impeachment, during election, during whatever, and it went completely unnoticed. You don't get a second chance to have a debut. That's the thing.
Right.
That's it. So go buy a pandemic debut,
Well, I also,
anything.
if I remember this correctly too, and I think it was a little bit right before the pandemic. But I think we had a time too because obviously there's like big five publishing houses, but I think there's only actual two places that actually print books, at least the major ones. And I know that they were, I think, short on paper for a while, so there was just nothing being printed either, which made things that much more.
A lot of books got pushed back, and then they all came out at the same time. I mean, this is bad. It's just there was nothing good about the pandemic except for the 5 books that everyone bought on Amazon. They sold a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
think Patterson only came out with like 17 books last year, so it was sorry. It was,
it's a slow year. Yeah.
James Patterson is never going to be on this with me. That's all there is to it. But hey, I feel justified though because he was one of the people on Castle, and even Castle made fun of him in one of the episodes. So I figure he's got a sense of humor about it. Um,
Probably.
all right. So I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you about this. I know you said you're a little shy, but it does not come across. You come across as a very good speaker. Absolutely love these two books. Can't wait for the third one to come out. I know that it's going to have to take some sort of a different take from where it's going, just because of how it ended. But I am super interested to see where you go with that. And I'm also super interested to accidentally learn about stuff that was way more exciting than anything I would have looked up on my own. I still love the Molly story that you had in that first book, the genetics thing. I gotta shout out to my daughter because she's always been a huge fan of anything to do with genetics. I'm gonna make sure she knows about that.
Fish power.
Fish power. All right. I will, as always, give a shout out to the Bookworm in Omaha since I'm down here in Omaha. If you're in the Nebraska area, 90th and Center, downtown Omaha. That's not, it just sounds better. Although it's getting close, everything keeps moving west. It's going to be downtown soon. And just for an extra one, I will give a shout out to the Tattered Cover in Denver. So if you're ever in the Denver area, check out the Tattered Cover as well.
Do.
Mr. Neuvel, I appreciate it. Even if we don't have you back on, I may shoot you a thing once I read that third book. Tell you how I felt about it. I have a feeling I'm going to like that one just as well.
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
one last
Thank you
question.
for
You said
having me.
you're working on a couple of things. What else are you working on besides stars? Take me to the stars, or is that
Things.
too early? Too early.
Oh, it's
Okay.
way too early.
Okay. We got to get through this one first. Got it. All
Yep.
right. So appreciate it, everybody who's watching. I actually won't be back in 2 weeks. I think it's 3 weeks, and I'm going to apologize now because I can't remember next. But I'm going to be on vacation, so I had to push a little back because I want to stay married, and I'm taking my wife out of the country. So again, we want to thank Mr. Neuvel for being on, and everybody have a good one.